All right, Karen, I'll probably go ahead and get rolling here. I'll just kind of start with some of the simple stuff here first. So just before rolling into the finance side, forecasting bit, and actually today I'm going to do a little bit of a short-term look back as far as what we've seen with interest rates, kind of sort of what we're in right now and what we sort of see moving forward. I've got a PowerPoint that I'll be kind of using somewhat as a guide. We won't be putting too much faith into it, but I'll kind of run through, and some of the slides I'll skip, but it'll be a good sort of resource just to lean on. So just to, for those of you who haven't noticed, we updated our CrossCountry web pages. So in addition to making it a little bit more seasonal, which is certainly fits the seasons I look outside today, we've updated sort of the application process that can be done online. It's somewhat maybe slightly more streamlined than it was before. The calculators especially, you can always call me for payments and such, but I do send buyers to the calculators, when they're just wanting to look at an amortization schedule or play around with that. This one in particular, the mortgage payment calculator is probably the one that most commonly people check out. So definitely would encourage you just to, feel free to play around with those. There are some blogs and such on here that you can kind of tinker around. Feel free to pull information from that. You can, kind of just copy and paste or just, link it in some of your, marketing and such, if that helps at all. So,
Sean, real quick on your calculator, does that default to like the current rate for the week or?
unfortunately not. Now, so just because there's so many different, right now it's been defaulted to 7%. It has been for a couple of months. I think that's more just where it's preset at. So no, it's not going to be updated to the current market just because from one person to the next, based on credit score or loan program, it's going to be different. So oftentimes if I'm telling somebody, I usually say, hey, if you're looking at a house, just give me a call or shoot me a text or email and I'll run some numbers for you. If you're doing it on your own, I might say, hey, rates are currently at 7%. If you want to play it safe, run in at 7.25 just to give yourself a little bit of cover. Yep. All right. So let's talk a little bit about interest rates, or a lot about interest rates, but gonna pull up this graph. So if you've been on these before, you've seen me refer to Mortgage News Daily. I like Mortgage News Daily. It's not necessarily oh.
Sorry. I don't think your screen is shared.
Oh yeah. All right, hold on a second. It's my first Zoom. Hold on a second. So you totally just missed the calculator I was just running through. Hold on a second.
We were all using our imagination.
Yeah.
It was beautiful.
But yeah, Jeremy just rolled with it.
Oops, you're sharing the wrong screen, Sean. Just kidding.
All right, now you're looking at the chart.
Yes, there you go.
All right, thank you. So I started to mention Mortgage News Daily. It's more for, generally the most common person who's going to be on this is going to be a loan officer rather than a consumer. So you're not hit with marketing from 1,000 different banks and lenders. But what this shows, I have up here just the 12-month graph of where interest rates are. Just to show why is there a blue line here and an orange line here. When you see interest rates posted or advertised, hey, rates just dropped to 6.99%, it's usually the Freddie Mac rate that's being posted. The Freddie Mac survey just lists what everybody's interest rate is with or without points. So the Freddie Mac average interest rate is always going to be lower because a lot of people pay points for a lower interest rate, where the Mortgage News Daily generally is a survey without points. So I think this is the more true, as we call it, kind of the par loan. So you'll see as of yesterday, the Mortgage News Daily was putting 30-year surveyed interest rate at 7.25%. So just tracking through this, a month ago, 5 weeks ago, 6.72%, 7.1% 2 months and a week ago. Look at where we were beginning of September, 6.12%. We're all over the place here. And actually, just to take it back to a 5-year, obviously, we remember the good old days of 2020, 21, and 22. So these days are long gone. And I don't want to say we'll never see those again, but we wouldn't see those for a long, long time. And if we do see those again, it's probably because of another economic collapse of some sort. So we don't really want to see those worldwide as much as we'd like to as a consumer loan officer and realtor. So by the way, obviously, just if anybody has a question, just feel free to jump in. So I want to go back to this 1 year look back to talk about interest rates a little bit. So we always talk about the Fed, the Federal Reserve Board. So the Federal Reserve Board is made up of 19 members, 12 of whom are voting, and they sort of set economic policy. And we're always looking to see what the Fed does. So in a very, very short version, what the Fed has done since COVID is there was an influx of cash put into the marketplace. People were saving money like crazy, eventually turned to spending money like crazy, and that drove up inflation. So the worst thing for mortgages or long-term loans is inflation, because if I'm lending, $100,000 to Chris today at, let's just say, a 7% interest rate, and inflation goes up, I know what I'm going to be making on that $100,000 loan at 7%. It's a mathematical equation, how much interest will be. So 12 months from now, assuming that loan is still, on the same amortization path, I know how much money I'll be making from that. But if inflation is up, that, let's call it $1,200 in interest or whatever it might be for that given year, in real dollar terms might only be worth $1,120 because the cost, the worth of a dollar is going down. So as inflation goes up, interest rates basically have to go up to keep pace. And the Fed uses that kind of to sort of control. So everybody is borrowing money, from consumers borrowing on mortgages to credit cards to car loans. And the general thinking is, okay, well, if I need to borrow money, something like, I forgot the statistic, but something like 9 out of $10 is being borrowed, at least initially. So a good way to slow the economy is making borrowing more difficult and more expensive. So if the Fed increases that, that's supposed to sort of slow down the economy, which brings down inflation, is the idea. Chris, econ major, do I have that about right?
Yeah, I think you do.
All right. All right, they don't call him the best color man in the league for nothing, folks. So feel free to add on to that if needed. That's a major league quote, by the way. So if anybody's, a little not in my same Gen X frame there. So what we've seen is inflation has come down. It's come down a lot from the peak of up over, Chris, 7.5%, 8%.
Almost 9, yeah.
9, yeah. So we're comfortably back into the twos, depending on which one you're looking at. And the Federal Reserve Board said they want to get it around 2, as close to 2 as possible, in so many words. And they've been on pace for that. So this summer, basically the scale tipped a little bit to where the Fed said, all right, well, we're seeing progress. We're seeing the inflation come back down. We're seeing unemployment go up. So I think feel like maybe we don't have this under control. That's probably not the right phrasing, but everything's going the way it should. So the Fed says basically we think we'll be able to start dropping interest rates. We'll drop it a few times before the end of the year. And going back here, I'm going to bounce back and forth with some slides here. The Federal Reserve Board comes up with, in so many words, implying that they're more or less expecting to drop interest rates in 2025 4 times for a total of probably 1%. So that was sort of what the Fed sort of led everyone to believe. I mean, they don't come out and boldly say it, but they sort of do with this. This is called a dot plot. So back in September, they do a survey every quarter, if I'm not mistaken, to all the Fed members and say, hey, where do you think interest rates are headed? What do you think, not necessarily what is a goal, but what do you think is realistic? So their forecast, this is back in September, was, year end 2025 for the federal funds rate to be around 3.4%. So this was the September mindset. So everyone says, okay, great. Rates are going to come down next year. We can start, pricing in mortgage rates, and everything should improve. So we go back over to this. Here we are. Look at September 11th. This is going from August. Well, heck, we were up over 7% in July, close to 7% still, end of July, and boom, here we are, beginning of September at 6%. We even locked in a few 5.9s, which was a whole lot of fun. So that was sort of the mode. Now, time's going on a little bit, more inflation reports are coming in, unemployment numbers, and it's like, okay, things are inching up as we get closer to the election. So regardless of which candidate was going to win, both were, basically going to be putting money back into the economy, and that, could be counterinflation, or I should say, could bring back inflation. And the seller said, okay, well, hold on a second. Now there's talks of tariffs, which, may or may not, but may indeed be not good for inflation. If there's a immigration sort of shortfall with jobs, that can drive up costs to pay employees and such. That also works against inflation. So basically, you saw rates kind of tick up. And then in December, I'm going to bounce over to here. The new dot plot comes out. So remember this other dot plot I just said? The Federal Reserve Board predicts year end for maybe the federal funds rate to be around 3.4%. That gets restated about not even a month ago. Now 3.875%. The Federal Reserve Board basically comes out, again, they don't come out and boldly say this, but reading between the lines is saying, all right, well, instead of them doing 4 drops to the interest rate to knock off about 1%, we're looking at probably 2 adjustments, knocking off just about 0.5%. So all of these things, inflation numbers, the unemployment numbers, and 1,000 other factors as well. Those are just the big ones that we take a look at. Kind of just that say the Fed's going to take their foot off the gas. Maybe we don't have inflation under control. Maybe unemployment's not all that bad. Maybe the economy is a little bit more robust than we expected. So we're going to take our foot off the gas. In so many words, that's what's happened, and that's what sort of the new sort of, I'll call it, forecast or expectation is. We're going to go a bit deeper here, but just to take a pause there, does that make sense? Is that any questions there? Or Chris, anything?
I think it was good.
All right.
Yeah, I do have a question. So I remember, and I think this is right, when when the rates started bumping up, we were talking to people about like 1% lessened your purchasing power. I think it was like 20 grand. Is that?
The rule is, so if rates go up or down 1%, generally that equates to 10% more or less in buying power. So if let's say today's rate is,
I got you.
so if today's rate is 7% and I qualify for a $200,000 loan, and a month from now they go to 8%, now I got to get to that $180,000, the new price point, to have that same $200,000 payment that we would have had at that lower rate.
Right.
Or flipping it around, if we're at 7%.
Or vice versa, if it goes down.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
So that's a very good rule of thumb, regardless of which way rates are moving. So yeah, it's good. That's a good one.
10% in purchase price, up or down, depending on, okay. I just wanted to be clear that I was remembering that correctly.
You nailed it. So that's I just wanted, this is kind of more on the grand level of the change, what we've seen from last summer to right now. There's all sorts of fun. I mean, I don't know, fun for me. I know Chris has fun, and Don and Carmen may even tinker around on these a little bit too. But there is the federal funds future predictor. So this shows, all right, the next meeting is January 29th. 97% chance that the rate stays the same. Yeah, there's a slim chance that they drop the federal funds rate, but next to nothing. March, and 74% chance that they leave it alone. And this is where a few months ago, this was almost a lock for being an adjustment. Let's take it back to May. Still 60% chance that they have not moved it from now until from then. June is the first one where we actually see more than likely between now and June that there's more than 40, in this case, 65% chance that they'll have a drop at least sometime between now and then, which again, originally it was 4 times. So June might be the first time that they drop it, is what this is predicting. And this number was a little bit higher, I think, or changed a little bit from yesterday to today. So, I mean, you could play around with this, or again, you don't have to, but just to see some of the stuff that we look at when we're looking for the inside scoop. I'll come back to a few other charts here a little later, but so let me get back. So this presentation, Barry Habib, who you may have heard myself, Mike, kind of refer to this guy. He's kind of more in the mortgage world, but he's on Fox News and Fox Business News and a few other channels, probably monthly, and maybe even more so when there's sort of mortgage is the hot topic. But this is sort of an economic forecast he put together, the dot plot we just saw. So if you're looking, what he kind of looked at is more or less a lot here is his forecast, and some of this might be a little ambitious. And I will say this forecast is a couple weeks old, which is already outdated because of the jobs number we got this past Friday. But what this shows is the Federal Reserve Board expects the unemployment rate to be at let's see, 14 of the 19 Federal Reserve Board members most of them expect the unemployment rate to be between 4.2 to 4.3. So that's kind of what they said, hey, we think rates will be here next year. It's based on this. So if unemployment comes in higher, that may lean them more to lower rates sooner. And Barry Habib's sort of numbers go into things like here, unemployment rising. Well, wait a second. What tells us that unemployment might get worse? Well, this is one sort of graph. Again, every point he makes or anyone makes, you can find a graph no matter what and contradict itself as well. But it just basically says when someone is on unemployment, there's a trend here where the time they're on unemployment is longer. So obviously, if someone's unemployed, that's one thing. But the time they get back into the workforce, if the average time is 8 weeks, okay, great. Let's say that's on average. But now if it's running 10, 11, or 12 weeks, that means people are finding jobs slower. That becomes a trend. Another point that he makes is reasons why unemployment get worse is all these big companies who have closed up stores. Party City closes 850 stores. And I kind of think to myself, that Party City store in Aurora that I go to is big. It's nice. It's convenient. I only see probably 3 people in there at a time. But when you got 850 stores nationwide, and obviously, there's multiple shifts and multiple workers, that's a big chunk of people. CVS closing 900 stores. And keep in mind, that's the clerk at the front, that's the manager, that's the stock boy, that's the pharmacist, that's the pharmacy tech. The pharmacy world's going through a transition because of the goofy third-party companies kind of getting involved and marking up prices. So again, this is from his perspective, reasons to look like unemployment might be a little worse than we realize. And again, that might lend to rates coming down. We're not signing up to that yet necessarily as across the board, but that's just some of the statistics that are popping out there. Let's see, let me jump back to inflation. So I don't want to get too much into this one. So one thing to remind you on inflation, and Chris, absolutely, please feel free to jump in here. But so what this inflation, the CPI is the one of the inflation calculations, but the blue line here is okay. It's the year-to-year change that we're seeing in actually, if you want to look at the one on the left here, jump in here, feel free, Chris. But basically, this shows how much inflation is moving on a monthly amount. But keep in mind, when inflation goes down, right, you're still looking at a 12-month look back, but it's always going up. So the price of eggs, or let's not do eggs because of the bird flu and all the other things, but price of a can of soup, it went from $1 to $1.10 to $1.20 or whatever you want to call it. If inflation drops, that doesn't mean, price is going to come back down to $1.15. That price is already up. Inflation is 0. It's going to stay steady. So the inflation always a 12-month look back. Chris, feel free to correct me.
Yeah. So, the big thing about inflation is obviously prices kind of always go up. An inflation rate is how much prices are going up. So when a lot of people think, well, inflation's going down, that means that grocery prices are going to go down, for example, or any basket of goods that you want to look at, For example, the Fed looks at you know, a whole range. It's like 6 pages of items that they take into consideration. What they're trying to see is how aggressively is pricing accelerating versus, you know, where we were last month and where we were 12 months ago. So your blue line is your cumulative over time. So that's the slow anchor. You know, real estate's a great example. You know, housing prices and values have slowly gone up over time. Obviously, the last few years they've gone up very aggressively. You can almost see that in that little bump there, that extra aggressive bump around 2020. But what they want to see is this line kind of settle back down and not be so volatile. And you can see the aggressive volatility. Obviously, 2010, big tank. Those gray areas are recessions, times of recession. We had a little one in 2020, although it's a little artificial with the shutdowns and everything. You can see inflation coming back down here over the last couple of years. They just want this to even out. And the goal is like 2.2%. If they can get to a 2.2% year over year increase in costs and pricing, that's their target goal. That's your soft landing, if you've heard that on the news.
And keeping it as simple as possible, we want inflation to go down for every reason. You as a consumer, you as a realtor, me as a loan officer, me as a shopper, regardless. And then unemployment, you know, you don't want to root for bad unemployment numbers, but as unemployment goes up, that will help interest rates. So, you know, that's more or less the byproduct of. I mean, people lose jobs, there's less spending, it'll weaken the economy, and that's when the Fed will have to act. And again, you know, keep in mind the Federal Reserve Board barely moved what I can't remember the time. Was it 18 months before they moved interest rates? Mortgage rates still jump all over the place. So what the Fed does isn't the single thing that drives mortgage rates or interest rates overall, but it's a big factor. So
Is what?
Say it again.
what was it, Monica?
What did you say it was?
It's a big
Drives the interest rates is, I missed that.
yeah, the Fed moving interest rates doesn't necessarily. So what the Fed does, mortgage rates will fluctuate even when the Fed is doing nothing, but it's a big driver. So the Federal Reserve Board, when they so if we go back to that rate chart, actually, let me just do that real quick. So I get the number of calls I got. So December, when was it here? I think it was December 16th or 18th was the no, it was the Federal Reserve Board meeting was on the 18th. Look at interest rates at 6.92% is the average interest rate on December 17th. December 18th, the Federal Reserve Board dropped interest rates 0.25%. Dropped the federal funds rate, I should say, 0.25%. And look what happened to mortgage rates. Do you know how many people called me to refinance in these 72 hours? I said, oh, yeah, I heard the Fed dropped interest rates and mortgage rates are down. I said, well, you're half right. Fed dropped interest rates and mortgage rates went up 0.25% in a 48-hour period. So remember, when they came out and dropped that interest rate, that's also when they kind of said, I don't think we're going to drop rates at the Fed funds rate at 1% next year, probably only 0.5%. So everything's counteract each other. Sorry. All right, zipping through just a few other slides in here. And by the way, I will tell you a week from Monday, the 27th, Mike Rapaski, a little bit of Ginter, myself, Don or Chris might be in the mix there too. He's going to do his state of the market, which I will tell you will be a bit more succinct. I will tell you, Mike's got much better jokes and one-liners than I do. At least I find them funny. But I definitely would say that's can't miss. He's going to give you a little bit more succinct. And also, I think his delivery more will be, okay, if you have a customer calling and asking you or a client looking for your advisement, here are some good things to pull. So the other part, I don't want to get too heavy into this because this is more your field than mine, but talk about, let's see, skip over. This is more housing market, but this statistic's pretty wild. So the boomers, 60 to 78 generation, 74% own a home right now, 65% of Gen X, and then the millennials we're kind of a little delayed in buying. About 45% of them buy right now. But the home ownership rate for when millennials turn 50 is 55%. So in the next, let's see, the next 10 years, that's 8.5 million homeowners being brought to market, getting into the market. We already know there's a housing shortage, and we know boomers are staying in their houses longer. And my parents, I can't bet they're in a bungalow with stairs all over the place, bad knees and all that stuff, and they will not leave that house. Um, so there is I'm sorry, I'm not generalizing all boomers, but my parents and my in-laws sort of fit that bill. So there's going to be a lot more buyers to come. Obviously, Gen Z is going to be next there as well. So more or less, the demand for houses is going to keep going up. Skip over. You guys know more about listings than I do. Housing starts just slow, slow, slow. There's not enough houses being built. Here's the one I want to get to. So again, Barry Habib, he's won, literally they have the mortgage rate crystal ball award. So he's predicted things pretty more accurately than most the past, I don't know, couple 20 years or whatever that might be. But his forecast for home appreciation is 4% to 4.5%. I think I would say that's a pretty accurate one. The demand is going to be there. Again, you guys have a better pulse than I would as far as listings and inventory, but pricing appreciation is going to stay, in my opinion, because that demand is still there with the shortfall of inventory. He predicts inflation to get to 2.1 to 2.2 from 2.8. I think that's, in my mind, probably a little ambitious, and there's too much unknown as far as what's going to happen with the new administration and things that come into play that don't, what's all talk and what's not. I think that's a little ambitious. Chris, feel free to throw in your 2 cents, but that would be nice to see for sure. Unemployment rate, he forecasted to 4.5%, 4.6 from 4.2. I'd say that's realistic. Again, he's kind of think there's going to be some big shift again, depending on a lot of the politics and policies moving forward. That could shake up quite a bit as well. And I will tell you, unemployment rates are so hard to believe these days. I don't necessarily would say that the data is being falsified or anything like that, but it's a lot hard to measure. You have somebody who leaves a job and they get into the sort of the gig economy and they're doing Uber and all that. They might be doing it 40 hours a week. Is that a full-time job? Is it not? There's a lot of gray out there that I would throw out. He expects the federal funds rate to get to 3.25 or 3.5. So based on this data where we are today, it doesn't look that's lined up. But if you're connecting the dots of saying, well, we think inflation's going to go down, we think unemployment's going to go up, that's the formula to get the federal funds rate. So that's his expectation, 3.25 to 3.5. Mortgage rates decline from, where being around in that 7% range, low sevens even for most, and we're still able to sneak into the sixes here and there. But he sort of sees them in the 5.7 to 6%. I would be very happy with that. Now, again, back in September, this looked like a lock because we were already hanging around 6.2, and them going down another quarter to 0.5%. It's like, yeah, we might be in the low fives. Who knows? That's gone out the window, and now 6% to 5.75 is extremely ambitious, maybe almost hopeful. So I don't know that I would sign up for that, but if the things unfold the way that he's showing here, that's entirely possible. Chris, you want to go on the record with any predictions?
Yeah. I thought 5.75 was a slam dunk, and then just the last week, that jobs report was really kind of frustrating. I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but like there's a spread between the federal funds rate and the retail rate, right? I mean, that's why the Fed fund rate, it could be 5.5, and the retail mortgage rate could be 7.5. And that spread is everyone that needs to get paid all along the way, who touches that money between it being created and it landing at its final resting place of this home buyer's new home. That spread, as rates ease down, that spread should get less aggressive too, because the likelihood that someone hangs on to this loan for longer, meaning the yield on the loan itself is going to be greater, meaning the investor is actually going to get more out of it, is more likely. So I think we're up against a rock and a hard place right now where it's like, okay, rates are high, that stinks. But also these investors are thinking, well, because they're high, they're more likely to be refinanced sooner. So that's less likely I'm going to make as much money on this loan as I normally would. Because of that, I'm going to charge even more. So it's like the rates go even higher from there. So I think, long story short, as they ease down, if we can get under 6 and it looks like, hey, we're here to stay, I could see us getting even a little extra, another quarter out of it, just as the market kind of calms down. Investors will be like, okay, someone's going to hang on to this mortgage for the normal average 7 to 10 years. I mean, most of our buyers, Sean, I think you'd agree, they have every intention of refinancing the second the rates go down 1%. They would love it. It would be the best news they heard. Don't you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's, we still have our buy now refinance special, or someone comes back and refinances, they get a hefty discount on costs and such from the lending side. And it's funny, like every buyer is just sort of like, all right, I'll take that interest rate, and hopefully we're talking again in 6 months or 12 months or 18 months to get rid of it. So, and it's true. So what Chris is talking about there, this chart here, so the 10-year Treasury bond, and I'll jump to another chart in a second here. The spread between that and the 30-year fixed, that's what people watch the most. So for, going back to 2000, with the exception of these spikes here along the way. And of course, I would just say throw out the Great Recession and throw out COVID. Very seldom, did that spread between a 10-year, we'll call it rate, and the 30-year rate, get more than 2%. You can just see these little spikes here and look at it hasn't been under even 2.5%. I mean, and it went high as 3%. So yeah, what Chris is saying is, in so many words, is if the 10-year Treasury just stayed the same, the market sort of normalizing itself or getting to a regular sort of even keel at some point should bring rates down. So yeah, so I would agree with either Chris, is you may see sort of, as rates ease down, you more sort of get a sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy of its own to improve itself on the way. So yeah, great point there. And then if you're interested, and you might not be, but this is a site, myself, Chris, Don, I mean, most people that are plugged into the mortgage, I have this open all day long. So what this is the up to the
Hold on,
minute.
Monica, did you have a question about the last slide?
I do.
Okay.
So like the rate in terms of purchasing power, when someone refinances to a 1% lower rate, what does that typically do for their payment? Like,
So
what's the advantage?
So the savings is going to depend on the loan size. So a 1% drop in interest rate on a $200,000 mortgage is going to be about $128 a month.
Okay.
So that's kind of a general rule of thumb. So and someone calls it refinance, now keep in mind, some people refinance because they want to pull cash out or because they're going through a divorce. Obviously, most cases it's to try and get a lower interest rate. So we do kind of a benefit, cost versus savings analysis. So if someone's, only has a $40,000 mortgage and they're saving 1%, well, you're saving less than $30 a month. Do you want to spend $2,000 in closing costs, or in some cases $3,000 or $4,000 in closing costs? Not going to make sense. But you got a $700,000 loan, you're saving 0.5%. I mean, that right there is going to be, I don't know, $225 a month. I don't hold me to that number just off the top of my head. Now it's going to make more sense. If we get into big swings, because October of 2023, rates hit the highest they did in 20 plus years. They were at 8.1%. I just refinanced somebody recently who was at 7.8% and got in at 6.6%. This was a big loan amount, and they're saving over $800 a month. Coincidentally, they just got their tax bill from Cuyahoga County. Their taxes are going up, and they're not saving a whole lot in the end when you compare with the new taxes factored in, but certainly makes sense from the lending side. So we'll do that. We do that math with any consumer. I mean, I'm pretty aggressive in making sure these numbers make sense, and probably talked myself out of business over the years, just because, hey, you really want to save $30 but add $3,000 to your loan amount? If you're going to be in this for 30 years, yeah, we can maybe add that argument. If you think you're going to sell this house in 2 or 3, run from that offer. And not
Okay.
all loan officers are, frankly, you know, I don't know what the word would be, but they would take advantage of people with scenarios like that.
Okay, just curious.
So this is that 10-year. So this remember I said, the 30-year fixed mortgage most closely mirrors what's happening with the 30-year fixed. So the 30-year fixed interest rate is as high as, it was 4.8% yesterday. So just back in December before that Fed meeting, it was as low as what, 4 point, what am I at there? 4.2-ish. So, Federal Reserve Board went up about 3/4, interest rates went up about 3/4, and sometimes there's a little lag one behind the other, but this is what we're plugged into each day. So this red is actually good. Over here, green is good because that's mortgage-backed securities. These little candlestick things, they may not mean a whole lot to you, but Chris especially likes to nerd out with these. You can just look at this and it's like a color coding of trends and seeing these little lines here. It's remarkable, and it's all analytics and all that, but really you're looking at this behind you going back, 6 hours, 6 days, 6 weeks, 6 years to forecast what's going forward. So really, I don't want to say everybody's guessing, but nobody clearly knows because the inflation number came out this morning. It came out good. It didn't really drop a whole lot, but it didn't go up. So we're feeling real good about that. So, I think those are most of the slides I wanted to show. Let's see here. Let me make sure I got the one over here. So we did the dot plot. Oh, I know. 2 more I'll show you. One, you as realtors, you've seen 1,000 charts like this before, but this again is just the existing home sales change over a year. So now this isn't going back, this isn't a 20-year graph. This is a 3-year graph of just the difference in changes in sales year over year. So again, we're just really, really thin on inventory. And then the other one on here, 27% of borrowers have a rate over 5%. So what this chart shows is the red blob down here is those with interest rates over 6%. The light blue are those with interest rates under 3%. So what the point here is, you got a lot of buyers who bought, 5 years ago and refinanced 3 years ago, or bought in 2020 and have an interest rate under 3%. They're kind of anchored to that property. They're talking themselves out of moving into the next house because they don't want to give away that 3% interest rate and be up around 7. But what this shows is, every year, every month, there's people who are selling their house or refinancing or paying it off or getting divorced, whatever. So that pool of people with 3% or lower interest rates is shrinking and will continue to shrink. And the number of people with a 5%, or I should say a 6% over, that is growing. So as time goes on, you'll get people who are less and less attached to that interest rate. Someone who bought in 2023 has an interest rate already over 6%. So then going to 7% isn't going to just sort of crush them. They can live with that. Yeah, they're not excited about it, but they're not turning in a 2.7% for a 7.0%. So just to show you that, the grasp on those old buyers or the grasp those buyers have with their old mortgage, just as time goes on, that will thin out. As I tell any customer, why are you looking at buying a house? When they start to list off 5 reasons, it's not good. You typically interest rate. Even when interest rates were 3%, they weren't buying a house because of the interest rate. They were buying the house because, the growing family or downsizing or this or that. And the interest rate, maybe helped incentivize it because of affordability, but that is not the number one reason for most. So those are most of the slides and charts I wanted to zip through. Chris, anything I forgot off the top of your head?
I don't think so. My big takeaway about this little pie chart and line chart here is that huge group there of 3% to 3.99%. If you can get rates down to like 5.5, I think you unlock those people. I think they come off the fence. The gap.
I agree with that. And the other thing too is, like you guys were talking about before, once these lower interest rates start shaking out and that interest rate with the investors. It'll give the investors more confidence, and I think that will help bring in the rate
Yeah, I
down
agree.
where, like you guys were talking about, as they get more comfortable with the stability of where those rates are hanging,
Yeah.
sounds like. So that's good too.
I feel confident we'll get there. It's just
Yeah.
it, you know, Sean can express this as well, but this all kind of started with us at the beginning of 2022 when rates started to tick up kind of slowly and then kind of very fast. And we were like, okay, the average kind of market like this market shift or turn is about 18 months. Well, that was 3 years ago now. So it's like, this is kind of the, when's it going to happen, so to say. And a lot of people feel confident that this could be the year. I'm hoping they're right. But I think it's just a matter of time before we get back to something a little more stable in the market.
Well said. And with Chris's, getting to that, 5.5 point. So if you look back at, there's no way to measure this necessarily, but there's certainly other graphs that show buyer activity and applications and purchase agreements. There was a spike right around here. This would have been in August, September. So that's a combination of, well, rates are lower. So yeah, of course, more people are buying.
What
But
was that rate, Sean?
what's that?
When there was a spike, what was the rate? 6 something?
A spike up?
Yeah.
What do you mean? Which?
You were saying what there was a spike in
Oh,
loans.
spike in sales, a spike in purchases,
Yeah. What
end
was
of
the rate?
summer or early fall. So that would have been like, August, September. And then
Okay.
closings that took place in October, November. So if you look at closings in October, November, those are people who went under contract in September when
Yeah.
these rates are lower. So it's not just, oh, rates are lower, I'll go buy a house. It's also, oh, rates are lower, I don't feel bad giving up my 4% interest rate or 3% interest rate. So it's sort of like, where's that mental breaking point? I keep hearing 5.75. As
Mhm.
rates get there, that's when everyone's like, okay, my interest rate isn't doubling now. I think I'm good to take the leap. So pretty much right along what Chris said there.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
Carmen, I didn't give you a chance to chat much. Anything you? Oh, she just jumped off. Oh, her time to shine, and I went too long. But yeah, that's really the presentation. I mean, what I would certainly say, most of the stuff I pulled online, if there's anything in here that you want to come chat about or want to talk through, more than happy. And as I tell anybody, all this stuff, it's, obviously for informational purposes. And these are conversations we have some customers in great depth or greater, and some not so much. But if you want to have a conversation on this, or if you want to have a customer who's wants a deep dive on this, especially if it's kind of helping shift their philosophy, if they want to do something sooner or later, just let us know. We're happy to chat about it. Cool. Any Monica or anybody else, any questions?
No, thank you. Nice, good information. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, sorry for chopping it all over the place, and I intentionally did not put the slideshow on. I do know how to do that, but I was using probably a third of the slides I had for the presentation. So thank you for that. So thanks everyone for joining us. Enjoy your midweek, and stay warm out there. And if there's anything Don, myself, or Chris can do, just feel free to reach out. Carmen as well. Thanks.